He said, we did the other.
He said, we did the other one.
For years, Duane Keffe D. Davis denied any involvement in Tupac Shakur's killing. But in 2008, according to a former LAPD detective, he admitted his role, not to police investigating Tupac's death, but to a task force that was looking into the murder of Notorious B.I.G.
Mr. Anderson grabbed a gun and shot across Mr. Smith into Mr. Knight's car that Mr. Tupac Shakur.
We did the other one. 4 words, spoken by a man who had denied any involvement in Tupac Shakur's murder for over a decade. Not to police working the case, not under oath, not yet. According to a former LAPD detective's own courtroom testimony, those 4 words came out during a task force interview about a completely different murder, the killing of Christopher Wallace, the man the world knew as the Notorious B.I.G. Here's your visual anchor, and it's the only one you need to carry through this entire case. A white Cadillac, sitting empty in an evidence lot for nearly 30 years, waiting for someone inside it to finally say out loud who was sitting where. This is the trial of Duane Keffe D. Davis, now unfolding in a Las Vegas courtroom, and prosecutors say the words that may convict him weren't pulled out of him by investigators chasing Tupac's killer. According to testimony now on the public record, he offered them himself, unprompted, decades after the fact, while trying to talk his way out of an entirely different set of charges. Before we go deeper into what the records actually show, make sure you're subscribed to the Crime Infinity, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. Let's build the timeline the way the court has, because the timeline is where this case stops being a rumor and starts being a paper trail. 1998. A federal task force is investigating narcotics trafficking in South Central Los Angeles. Davis is on their radar, facing charges serious enough to put him away for the rest of his life. According to testimony from a former FBI agent who sat across from him that year, Davis was asked directly about Tupac Shakur. He denied it. He said he wasn't there.
Promo code sidebar, and you can start exploring today. Okay, let's jump back into this. So I want to start with that FBI agent. His name is Wade Lee. Back in the late 90s, he was assigned to a federal task force that was investigating gangs in South Central LA. One of the people that he was looking at was Duane Keffe D. Davis. So Davis ended up getting indicted on these drug charges, allegedly trafficking 2 kilograms of cocaine. Davis was facing some serious prison time. So in the summer of 1998, Davis apparently sat down for what's called a proffer interview. It's essentially a meeting between a suspect, potentially a defendant, and law enforcement. And this is a meeting where someone would offer information, seemingly in exchange for leniency, possibly avoiding prosecution altogether. The statements really wouldn't be used against them, at least in that prosecution. And during that conversation, Lee reportedly asked Davis about the Tupac Shakur killing. What was Davis's response? Denied any involvement. Said he wasn't there, that he didn't know who did it, and in fact, he seemingly pointed the finger at someone.
And according to the same testimony, he pointed the finger elsewhere, at Compton police officers he claimed were connected to a rival organization.
Sidebar on this. According to this witness, he suggested that corrupt Compton police officers working for Suge Knight might have been responsible. Remember, Suge Knight has long been accused of being an affiliate or a member of the Mob Piru Bloods, this what appears to be rival gang, or was a rival gang, to Davis's Southside Crips. So when Davis seemingly points the finger at other people, he's, I guess the argument would be, accusing his own enemies. But there is something that you need to understand about the timing here. So by this point, 1998, rumors had already been swirling about who could have been involved in Tupac's killing. This was going on for years. And people were talking about the Southside Compton Crips being involved.
That's not a confession. That's the opposite of one. And it matters because it establishes something the defense will lean on hard, that Davis has a documented history of telling investigators whatever version of events served him best in that moment.
About what Davis allegedly told him regarding death row records and drug trafficking.
As far as the gang activity and things of that nature. And he mentioned there was an individual by the name of Harry O that provided money to start the Death Row Records. Also, what's his name? I believe Patrick Johnson provided approximately $80,000. Actually told Davis to give $80,000 that money that Davis owed to Johnson from previous gain transactions to Johnson's girlfriend, so that money could be used to start Death Row Records.
And he also explains Marion Suge Knight's role and his connection to the Blood gang members.
Yes, he did. He said that Marion Knight had gained control of the North Compton drug trade, and that he was associated with a bunch of the Blood Street gang members, like the Mob Pyrus and such. And they were, the Knight was getting them in and out getting them out of jail, bailing them out, and they would cooperate with Knight.
And basically, when Knight goes to prison, he tells you Reggie Wright kind of takes over.
Yeah, Reggie Wright Jr. took over the organization after Suge Knight was arrested.
So it appears, according to Lee's testimony, Davis was telling the FBI and Death Row Records was built on drug money, seemingly corroborating that it was.
Here's the moral refrain, and you're going to hear it 2 more times before this video ends. The words changed every time the stakes changed. 10 years pass. A different task force. This one built around the murder of Christopher Wallace, staffed by LAPD, FBI, DEA, and ATF investigators. Davis is brought in again, this time over drug trafficking allegations serious enough, once more, to end his life outside prison walls. According to testimony from one of the detectives on that task force, investigators asked Davis about Biggie. He said no involvement. And then, according to that same sworn testimony, without being asked, he added the 4 words that reframed the entire interview, an admission that pointed the conversation somewhere nobody in that room had been prepared to go.
Admitting he didn't follow up. Now, 10 years later, according to another witness, everything changed. A different investigation was underway, and this one focused on the killing of Notorious B.I.G. So there was this task force that was made up of the LAPD, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF. They were looking into whether anyone connected to Death Row Records or the Southside Compton Crips was involved in the assassination. Duane Keffe D. Davis was on their radar. Now, the lead detective on this task force seemed to be Greg Kading, and one of his partners was a man named Darren Dupree. They reportedly had evidence that Davis was involved in drug trafficking PCP and cocaine, which, could put him away, for the rest of his life? So they approached him, let him know they had a case against him, and they allegedly offered him a deal. Come in, talk to us about Biggie Smalls, maybe we can work something out. So Davis sat down with them, with an attorney present, federal prosecutor was there too, and when they asked Davis about Biggie, he said he didn't know anything. But then, and this is key, according to Dupree, Davis said something that caught everyone off guard.
During the course of that, do you ask Mr. Davis about his involvement in the Biggie Smalls murder?
Yes.
And what is his response?
At that time, he said, no, we didn't have anything to do with that.
When he said, we didn't have anything to do with that one, did that trigger anything in your mind as to what he was saying?
When I recall, yes, we were like, that one, what do you mean? And then he said, we did the other one.
He said, we did the other one. And so, at that point, what did you think he was talking about?
Me personally, the only other one was Tupac. But we had nothing, we didn't think we were talking about Christopher Wallace. We didn't ask him any questions about Tupac. He offered that on his own.
And so when he does that, is there some discussion then of maybe having a conversation about Tupac?
It was a surprise to us. Number one, we were shook. We were surprised. Yes.
That moment right there, That led to this proffer interview on December 18th.
So here's your ticking clock question, the one that turns a courtroom transcript into something closer to a thriller. If Davis hadn't volunteered that sentence, if he'd simply stayed silent about Biggie the way he'd stayed silent about Tupac for over a decade, would anyone in that room have ever circled back to 1996 at all? Because that's what the record shows. The door into this case wasn't kicked down by investigators. According to testimony, it was opened by the one man who had spent 10 years making sure it stayed shut. What followed, according to that detective's account, was a formal interview in December of 2008, one built specifically around Tupac's death. And this time, Davis's account was detailed. He allegedly described riding in the white Cadillac.
This time, all these years after the killing, this interview was specifically about Tupac Shakur, and according to Dupree, this is when Davis laid out his version of events in detail, claiming that he was in the white Cadillac, that he had a .40 caliber gun, that he allegedly passed it to the back seat, but the would-be shooter got scared, so Davis's nephew Orlando Anderson, remember, the prosecution claims that this was revenge, that Tupac and co. beat up Orlando Anderson earlier in the night, on the night that Tupac was killed at the MGM Grand, right? So Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson, allegedly grabbed the gun and fired. This was the first time that Davis had allegedly admitted to being in the car, to having the gun, to being part of what happened. Here's what Dupree claims Davis told them.
Mr. Davis stated that his nephew, Mr. Orlando Anderson, was jumped and beat up in a club or in a hotel in Las Vegas after the Tyson fight. He came and told Mr. Davis what happened. They went looking for Tupac, Suge, anybody who was involved, basically, in the beatdown of Mr. Anderson. And they couldn't find him at first, and then they saw him, and basically Mr. Davis had the gun at first, but they came up on the passenger side of Suge Knight and Mr. Shakur's vehicle, so he couldn't shoot across the driver. So he handed the gun to Dre in the back seat, Andre Smith. He was afraid to shoot. Mr. Anderson grabbed the gun and shot across Mr. Smith into Mr. Knight's car that Mr. Tupac Shakur was in with Mr. Knight.
And did he tell you what kind of vehicle he was in?
He was in a white Cadillac.
Did he tell you what kind of gun was used?
A .40 cal Glock.
He allegedly described holding a .40 caliber handgun. He allegedly described passing that weapon to the back seat when the man beside him hesitated to fire, a man prosecutors identify as his own nephew, Orlando Anderson. According to the detective's testimony, the shots that killed Tupac Shakur came from that back seat, fired across another passenger toward the vehicle carrying Shakur and Marion Suge Knight. Read that back slowly. A man who spent a decade denying he was anywhere near the scene now allegedly placed himself inside the car with a weapon in his hand, describing who fired and why. That's not a detail buried in a sealed file. That's testimony now sitting in open court under cross-examination for a jury to weigh. Here's the moral refrain for the second time. The words changed every time the stakes changed. And this time, the stakes were his freedom. Now let's talk about what happens to a confession once the defense gets a turn with it, because this is where the case gets legally uncomfortable in a very specific way. Defense counsel pressed the detective on what exactly had been verified. Under questioning, the detective acknowledged that investigators never confirmed several of the specific details Davis provided, including whether another man Davis named as present in Las Vegas that night was actually there. The detective testified that verification efforts were instead directed toward a separate claim involving money allegedly connected to Sean Combs that ultimately went nowhere because the intermediary Davis pointed to had died of cancer before he could be questioned.
They went after Dupree the same way they went after Lee. And I'm going to get into that in a second. But first, I just have to establish another well-known connection here that was brought up during this line of questioning. And that concerns Sean Diddy Combs, the CEO of Bad Boy Records. According to Dupree, Davis didn't just admit to being in the car. He claimed that Diddy, who was referred to back then as Puffy, was connected to this in some way.
Mr. Davis had a narcotics friend in New York by the name of Equan Williams, Zip. He said he could, this is a lot deeper than that. Sean Puffy Combs was supposed to have given money to Zip Martin to give to Mr. Davis for payment of the Tupac murder. Fast forward, we go to Mr. Davis. He says he can rekindle that relationship with Mr. Zip Martin and get him to talk about the money that was given from Sean Puffy Combs to Mr. Martin that never got to Mr. Davis.
And did you guys, or Mr. Davis, come up with a plan to get leverage on Mr. Williams, Zip? And what was the idea?
Me, Detective Kading, ATF Jim Black, and Keffe D, Mr. Davis, flew to New York so Mr. Davis can work undercover to try to rekindle that friendship and business relationship with Zip.
According to Dupree, Davis told investigators that Diddy was involved, that money was changing hands. He apparently took this seriously.
Sit with that for a second. Prosecutors are asking a jury to convict based substantially on a man's own recorded words. The defense is asking that same jury to remember that those words came from someone who had already changed his story once, who stood to gain protection for his family by cooperating, and whose most specific claims were never independently confirmed.
Acknowledge why Davis might have been motivated to talk.
You had also targeted the idea, though, that it wasn't just him moving some large amount. It was people coming into his house, potentially his family. People could be arrested, his friends, for instance, that was part of that, and they all could go to prison, right?
I will say this. Mr. Davis took the hit for a lot of people in his family and his kids, his wife, but that's why he did a lot of the stuff he did. I will say that.
And I appreciate you saying that.
So that's where the defense may have been going with that, right? That Davis had reasons to say what he needed to say in order to protect the people around him.
Both of those things can be true inside the same case file, and a jury now has to decide which one carries more weight. On redirect, the detective was asked the question that cuts straight through all of it. Did he believe Davis was telling the truth? According to his testimony, he did, because Davis had placed the weapon in his own nephew's hand, a young man the detective described as beloved in that neighborhood. And the detective testified he didn't believe Davis would say that about family unless it happened.
Comes back to question a witness, asked a simple question. It's a theme we heard in the defense opening statement. Did you believe him? Did you believe Davis? Here's what Dupree said.
When you were talking to Mr. Davis and he's telling you what he's telling you, did you have reason to doubt his version of events as it relates to the homicide itself?
I didn't think Mr. Davis was lying because he put the gun in his nephew's hand. And if anybody knows anything from what I hear, Mr. Orlando Anderson was the man besides Keffe D in that neighborhood. He was the prince, and his family loved him. I didn't think that Mr. Davis would put the gun in his own nephew's hand, dead or alive, and put that smut on him unless it was true. The person that killed Tupac, well, in the neighborhood, he's a hero. In the world, he's a villain. So I didn't think Mr. Davis, me personally, would do that unless it was true with his own nephew, because I know he loved his nephew.
So that was
That's not proof. That's one investigator's read of one man's motive for talking. The jury doesn't have to share it. Here's the moral refrain for the third and final time. The words changed every time the stakes changed. And now 12 people have to decide whether the version he finally landed on, the one that came without prosecutors even asking, is the one that was true all along, or simply the one that cost him the least. There's a piece of this trial that doesn't live in the exhibits or the cross-examination, and it deserves to be said plainly. Tupac Shakur's family has sat through nearly 30 years without a courtroom answer. According to public statements from family members who have attended the proceedings, sitting in the same room as the man accused of orchestrating that killing has been, in their words, deeply uncomfortable. Uncomfortable enough that they've asked the court to direct him not to make eye contact with them.
Sit down with Jamila Barnes. This is Tupac's cousin, a board member of the Tupac Shakur Foundation. She has been in that courtroom every day, and she told us what that experience has been like. How has it been being in the courtroom with Keffe D?
Incredibly uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. It's not been, it's just been very uncomfortable for myself and my family, to the point that, you know, we've had to ask the marshals, like, can you direct him to just look forward? He doesn't have to look at us. He doesn't have to make eye contact with us. It's already incredibly uncomfortable. So, you know, those nuances just add to the awkwardness and uncomfortableness and the trauma, really, of the situation. There were two moments that were particularly harder for me. The one was the autopsy, questioning. Half of the family left out, and then the other half of us kind of stayed in just to observe. I was one that stayed in. I actually was kind of emotionally prepared for the images that had been surfacing for many years. But there were just more graphic images that I had not previously seen that were very difficult for me. So I had to excuse myself from the courtroom when those images were displayed. So Tupac is my big cousin. He's 5 years older than I am. And, my core memories of him are just my big cousin, you know, from my childhood. Like, I have really beautiful memories of him from.
That's not a footnote to this case. That's the actual cost of 30 years without accountability, sitting 3 rows back from the defense table. Davis has pleaded not guilty. Under the law, that presumption of innocence holds until and unless a jury says otherwise. Nothing in a detective's testimony, however specific, however unprompted, changes that standard. What it does is give a jury something they haven't had in this case for 3 decades, a version of events, in the alleged killer's own words, that a court can actually test. If you want to look at the record yourself, instead of taking anyone's account of it, including mine, the trial transcripts and filings in the Nevada versus Davis case are part of the public court record in Clark County. Read the cross-examination of the verification gaps for yourself, and read the detective's account of the December 2008 interview against it, line by line. Then tell us in the comments, when a confession only surfaces after a man is cornered by unrelated charges, twice, a decade apart, does that make the words more believable because he had nothing left to gain by lying, or less believable because he's proven he'll say whatever gets him out of the room? If you want us to keep following this case through verdict, hit like, share this with someone who follows trial coverage as closely as we do, subscribe to the Crime Infinity, and turn on notifications, because the moment this jury reaches a decision, we'll be back to break down exactly what it means.